Don't know what your impression of last week was. We're going to give it one more shot, okay? You may have hated it. Well, if you did, then we'll be back to normal next week. Just bear with us again, okay? If you like it, we'll do it again sometime. I'm not sure when, but Todd and I are going to have another conversation, this thing we call the fly on the wall, and conversations that pastors have when no one else is around. Like we said, we kind of sit at this altar on Tuesday mornings and have our staff meeting, and we just talk about a lot of different things, and it's amazing where that conversation goes and the things that we struggle together with spiritually and socially and morally and just in different areas. And so as we're talking about different things here, we say to one another, man, it would be good if our congregation could hear the conversations that we're having, because we think they're really, really important. And maybe you're having those same conversations. I'm not sure. But we're going to do it again. And as we go through it, if you have a question regarding what we're doing, what we're talking about, please feel free to text it to Todd, and he might read it. We'll see. We're not sure. I think we got one or two last week altogether, which was good. But and we tend to talk quite a bit, and maybe won't even get to those. So our apologies in advance. But let me just do a little housekeeping before we really go into our conversation. We understand that that these conversations are a bit open-ended, that we're not really coming to a ton of conclusions, just asking questions, and maybe they create more questions for you, more confusion for you. Well, if they do, then maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good to have to think and to engage your mind on different things. And so we just want you to know that they're not 3 points in a poem. There's no real ending to these things. We're just continuing to open up the conversation. And the other thing is that in this particular conversation today, we may push a few buttons, okay? And you may be a little offended by the stuff we're talking about. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe you're going to be going, yes, that's right, we love that. But here's what I want you to do, okay? If you are sensing some conviction, some anger, you feel your temperature rising, maybe that's the Spirit of God convicting you. And so maybe you ought to think it through and just let the Spirit of God speak, okay? Because kind of where we're going, it may move us into areas that aren't super convicting. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago about a man who was invited to go to church, wasn't a believer, went to this particular church, and it was a Sunday that the preacher got up and preached on homosexuality and the sin of homosexuality. And this guy was so enraged by what this preacher was saying. He said, I was blanched. I literally turned red and had like splotches all over me. I was so angry. I said, I will never go back to that church. He did go to another church the following week, though, and he said the pastor stood up there and he said this that really made me think. He said this. He said, sometimes God offends your mind to reach your heart. So there may be times when in your mind you have this worldview that is incongruent with what Scripture teaches, and you may be angry by what you hear. That may be God offending your mind to reach your heart. So examine yourself and see exactly what is going on there. Really, what we're talking about today is how do we live in a culture without being swallowed up by it? You know, the culture that teaches us on so many things: morality, ethics, hurrying from here to there, chasing after things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of eternity. How do we live in this culture without being consumed by it? If you look at the Old Testament, you find that the Ten Commandments were actually given twice. They were given two different times, and you can read through the Ten Commandments, you can find them. But when Moses gets to the commandment of taking a Sabbath, of resting, you'll find that there are two reasons that God gave. The first reason is remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, because God created the whole world in 6 days. And on the seventh, he rested. We rest because we are creations of God. The next, though, is interesting. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, because you were slaves in Egypt. You remember? You were enslaved. You worked all the time. You could never not work. And I've set you free. So we keep Sabbath in our lives to remind ourselves that we will never be slaves again. But is the church, are those who name the name of Christ living, to a certain degree in bondage? And so we want to just spend some time talking about that. We will move into specifics, and some of those specifics may not, hit you where it matters, but there's going to be something we believe, we've prayed, that God will say that's going to touch on something for you. My closing statement, or end of my opening statement, I guess. Some of you may have read an article several years ago that Joe White wrote from Kanakuk Camps. He wrote, and the title of it was Close the Zoo. And in that, he talked about the Hong Kong Zoo was open 7 days a week. And they found that the animals in the Hong Kong Zoo, because it was always open, didn't want to come out of their, hiding. They didn't want to play with one another. They didn't want to, act like, animals in a zoo should act. Shame on them. And so they thought, what are we going to do about that? And they decided, hey, what if we close the zoo for a day? And they closed the zoo for a day. And that didn't change a lot, believe it or not. So they said, why don't we close it for 2 days? And they closed the zoo for 2 days a week. And those animals came back and started to recover from, being watched by us humans all the time. Ever felt like the zoo is never closed in your life? It's always open. I feel like that a lot. And so this is where we're going to go. So Todd, what do you, when you think about that statement, living in a culture without being consumed by it, what thoughts come to your mind? Or what do you think is maybe the biggest thing inside of that?
Well, I'm struck by the Sabbath commandment about remembering that we're not in slavery, mm-hmm. and that I wonder how many of us would say, I feel like I am. Like I feel like I'm still enslaved by my commitments to work. I just was, have visited with a lot of people who actually are enslaved by health insurance. That they can't, they have to work so that they can pay for health insurance. Or you have to work to pay for childcare. I mean, there's a lot of things that seem to really enslave us. And, as I think about that, and a lot of our conversation oftentimes goes to kids' activities, mm-hmm. sports, busyness. And with me, I've got 2 kids. Owen is going to be 9 here in a couple days, and Auburn just turned 7. And we are getting ready to enter into that kind of that crazy time period of kids' activities. And actually, it's been a part of our life. It's been available to us, I guess, since our kids were 2 and 3 years old. Whether it was music stuff or theater, or sometimes even church stuff, to be honest. And so, man, this idea that I am maybe still enslaved because I can't find Sabbath. And I don't know that it's necessarily that Sabbath has to be one full day, even though actually that's probably pretty important. But even finding Sabbath during the week, in the midst of the chaos, so to speak, mm-hmm. I think is important too. But boy, this whole kids' activities and sports and just the lure of that, mm-hmm. and that's a big conversation in our house.
Well, let's go back to the definition that Louis Giglio gave. He says, and it's up there, you follow the trail of your time, your money, your thoughts, and your energy And that trail will eventually lead to a throne. And whoever or whatever is on that throne is what or who you worship. That is so convicting because, if you follow that trail, what does it lead to? Romans 12 says, do not be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And it seems like there is this incredible temptation, especially with younger dads. I'm through that. And we made mistakes. We did a lot of things right, I think, though, in raising our kids who love sports and were involved heavily in it. I'm a coach. I feel like this conversation may tempt people to think that, well, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. I mean, for 3 months out of the year, I spend, 20 hours a week coaching baseball. And I know that's a lot of time. And is it an idol to me? It can become that. It's not. I think it's a tool.
Why do you coach?
Simply, I coach. I love baseball. I love to be with those guys. But the bottom line, and this was really the reason why I started, is I know that it gives me an in to lives that I don't normally have. I'm here so many days. I'm not stuck in my office, but I'm studying a lot. I'm with people, but I'm really somewhat secluded sometimes. And so to be able to get back out there and to rub shoulders with other families is a good thing. And honestly, the bottom line for me to coach is I coach the whole season for one opportunity. And at the end of what we think is our last practice maybe will be, what I've always done for the years I've done it is I've said, okay guys, practice is over, we're done with coaching, and I don't have anything to say to you as a coach any longer, but if you would just stick around for just a couple minutes, I'd like to share with you what's most important to me. And I've been able to I think I've coached for 10 years, and I've said, you can leave, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but nobody's ever left, and I've been able to share my testimony and share the gospel. And honestly, in my best days, that's why I do it, so that I can have that opportunity.
So there's a real strong purpose for what you're doing. It's not just to win a few baseball games. It's not just so that you can get out and throw batting practice every day, But there's a real depth to that as to why you do it. And I think that's probably a really good place for us as people and as families. Why do we do what we do? What's the purpose behind this? And maybe, to me, the reason culture gets such a big hold on this is because we don't ask that question or maybe take the time to real seriously think about that, about why I'm doing this. Because if we did, perhaps what would happen is we would say, okay, yes, culture is offering this, whether it's activities or whatever it is. This would be anything. But it's being offered to me. And if I were to say, well, yeah, that's kind of what everybody does at this time of life, then I just go on and I kind of like kind of like a sheep, I just follow along with the path and go with the rest of the sheep. Whereas if I really consider what this could possibly do, what are the implications of me saying yes to this? What are the implications of saying no? And maybe that's where we begin to ask those questions so that we can say, well, I'm not just going to do this just because it's what's expected or what is normal and typical in my culture, whether that's in a small town or just in the United States or whatever. But I'm actually saying there is a purpose. There's something purposeful behind, first of all, my life, my family, and specifically in the context of this sports and this culture, my parenting, and my marriage. So I've got all of these things that I'm considering, and what I say yes to is going to probably affect each of those. And am I willing to deal with all the consequences of what come with the yes and then a no of that? So, for example, we've got Owen. Owen loves sports. Like, as a 9-year-old, he is unbelievably obsessed with sports. All he does is play with a ball of some sort, or collect football or basketball cards, or watch a sport on TV. Like, that's literally everything he does, unless we make him do something different, okay? But if he's got a choice, that's what he's going to do. And so right now, there are plenty of opportunities for him to play. And we want him to play because God has placed it on his heart for this desire. And so we want to say that as parents, we are training up our child in the way they should go.
According to their bent.
Yes, according to their bent. Yes, so Proverbs, 22:6, I think, that says that. Training in the way they should go. And so we want in some way to encourage him in that direction, but at the same time saying yes to every sport, every season, and the way that sports are now, it's not just every sport, every season, it's like a sport for the whole year. And so things are shifting to where now we're saying, if we say yes to Owen playing certain things, what that's going to do is affect the family pace of life. It's going to affect what we're doing on certain evenings and weekends, and it's going to, in some way, take away from something else. And we would then need to say, okay, am I willing to have that take away from perhaps church attendance on Sunday morning, perhaps certain things that would happen in the evenings, and then also consider, what does this do for his sister? Because his sister is a part of our family, and she's going to be impacted by this. And then we need to say, how does it affect our marriage? How does this affect one characteristic of our family that we really strive for is peace. And that's really hard when you're doing a whole lot of different things. And so that has helped to inform us as to how to make some of these decisions, to discern what I want for my family, what I want for my kids, what I want for my marriage, what does God want specifically in all of these. And it goes back, I think, to several scriptures about, whatever you do in the name of Jesus Christ. Considering how do we love one another and then not forsake the gathering of the saints, like in Hebrews 10 or 11. Above all else, guard your heart, for from it flow the well springs of life. I mean, all of those scriptures are going to be informing this decision. So all that to say, there are a lot of things informing the yes and no to a very simple, does my kid play sports? And then, if I say no, what are the ramifications for him and for us as a family according to what others maybe would see? So there's a lot wrapped into this whole thing and how we're specifically dealing with it.
Are you saying that there is still peer pressure for you as a dad?
Oh my gosh. I hated high school because of that reason. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to kind of step away from that. But now, honestly, I've had several conversations with dads and feeling kind of this pressure like, your son, why is he not playing? Which is a great opportunity to say why he's not playing. Yeah. Because then it gives me an opportunity to say, our family is going to be impacted by all the things that are going to happen here. And so it gives me an opportunity to explain that what's important with our family, how Christ is at the center, and how that can impact. So it does give us an opportunity for a conversation about the gospel as well.
I think when you ask that, the question of purpose and why do we do what we do is really important. Andy was talking to me before. We were talking about what we're going to talk about, And he said they used to live in Frisco, Texas. And I get, if I'm wrong, correct me, but there is a sign as you enter Frisco, Texas that says, "Welcome to Frisco, Texas, the greatest city in America if you want to raise an athlete." Wow. Right? So there it is. So what I want to do is I want to raise an athlete. So I'm going to move to Frisco, Texas. Is that what you want to do? I hope not. I sincerely hope not, because it's ridiculous. It's a pipe dream at best. What we should say is, I would love to use the tool of athletics to teach my child a lot of great character traits. Patience and teamwork and sacrifice and friendship and effort. All those things are really good, but it seems to me when we say that's it, that's the bottom line, I want to create this, you're setting them up for failure. You just are. I mean, what percentage ever make it to that, level where they are considered an athlete? And who wants that to be their identity? You are a great athlete. But if your identity is just in that, what happens when it's taken away from you? What happens when you blow your knee out? What happens when it's gone? Because it's going to be gone. It will be taken away from you. You'll have to walk away from it.
I think the key in it is helping our kids and helping us to realize that our identity doesn't lie in what we do.
Right.
Our identity lies in who we are, and specifically as Christians and who we are in Christ. And that goes back to last week's conversation about abiding and resting in who we are and trusting that that's the most important thing about us. So at the core, that's really key, that we are learning that ourselves and we are passing that on to our kids. And then asking the question, what is the purpose of this parenting? What am I trying to actually do? And probably we might say, well, I hope all of us would say, I really don't want to raise a child who turns into an adult who is selfish and self-centered. However, if all of my life as a family revolves around their activities and what they do, am I not teaching that very thing?
Exactly.
Now, that's a convicting thought, because that kills me, because I know how much time all of us spend in our kids' activities. And that can be music and theater and sports and things that are actually really, really good. So again, in and of themselves, not bad, but what are we doing with them? I've got a friend who lives in Wichita, and he says that he does allow his son, his son's a wrestler, and a pretty good wrestler. And they do travel and they do some different things, but he said, what I do is I take advantage of the times in the car when we are driving to and from those meets to talk about things that are important.
Yes.
So as a family, we are in some way redeeming the time, because it's going to happen. Once you, especially entering junior high is going to get to a place where you just have practice every day and you've got games, and high school's the same way. So it gets that way. So is there a way to redeem the things that we are involving ourselves in?
You should. I mean, I think that's really key. And to ask the question, can it be redeemed? There are certain things that can be redeemed, and there are certain things that can't be redeemed. I can't redeem a particular sin. That is sin, and I don't know, whatever you want to name it. There's something that is sinful that I can't redeem. But to me, when I look at sports, academics, music, drama, those are all neutral in and of themselves, I believe. So you can either redeem it or you make it an idol. I think the kids are the same way. Isaiah said, and it's so funny to me how he said it. He said, and think about it for a minute, right? You got this guy, he cuts down a tree, and he splits some of the wood, and he makes a fire with some of the wood, and he cooks his bread and his meat, and he eats this meal because the heat from the fire creates that to make it, and it's good and all that. And then he takes another portion of the tree that he just cut down, and he fashions it into an idol. And it's comical to me. He cuts a tree down, he makes this idol, and he knows, and I think Isaiah said, well, let me just read it, because to me it's good. He says, the carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with chisels and marks it with compasses. He shapes it in human form in all its glory, that it may dwell in a shrine. And then he explains what he does. He cut down cedars, or perhaps a cypress or an oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It is used for fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself. He kindles a fire, bakes his bread. But he also fashions a god and worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half of the wood he burns in the fire, and the other half he makes into a god. And so anyway, you can see what's going on. Jeremiah said, kind of in relation to this, he said, for the customs of the peoples are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idol is like a scarecrow in a cucumber field. I love that. Their idol is like a scarecrow in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. A piece of wood is a piece of wood. It can be used for good things, or it can be used for not so good things. And I think, and this goes back to parenting or anything else, you can say your job or whatever, but let's just take kids. God has given us children. For what? So that we make them idols? So that we make our lives be surrounded by them? I'm not saying we neglect our children. I don't think that's what we should do at all. I mean, I think James talks about, you can't, you're worse than an infidel if you don't take care of your children. But when they become something that they're not created to be, I think that's really a problem. And you look at that description again, and you follow that trail, and who is on the throne? So my point is that there are some things that it is what it is, and there's some things that we must reject. And the thing that we must reject is creating an idol out of anything but God.
And so that maybe looks different family to family?
I think it does.
So for one family, they can engage in multiple activities and a busier schedule because they are in some way not making it an idol.
Yeah.
And another family actually has to not do it. Can you think, how would we be able to discern which family we are? I mean, does it go back to maybe just this question? Or this statement here?
Yeah, I think I think it goes back to asking the question, why?
Yeah.
Why am I here? Why are we doing this?
Why do you think most parents, again, just speaking in this context, but why is it that most parents find themselves just totally exhausted, drained, and almost at a place of just like, I can't hardly even do this anymore, can't hardly take this. Why is it we put ourselves through that, I guess?
Because we think it's going to satisfy. Now, I'm a dad, and dads, we are guilty, aren't we, of living vicariously, maybe not mothers, I don't know, living vicariously through our children. Saying, I will find validity in myself if my son does what I could never do. And so you see it, right? 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds playing Y basketball, and these nutty dads yelling at them like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why aren't they just having a good time? And it's just insane to me. And you can go all the way up through high school basketball or whatever, and it's embarrassing. But I think the reason is this is what they're putting they're putting their eggs in that basket. I watched a game this winter, and a kid was playing basketball. He's a good basketball player, but he's high school good. And I watched his parents, and I thought, man, this matters too much to you because it's almost over. And so all the value you've placed in this kid is because of how he performs. What happens when it's done? What happens when it's done for him? Where's he go from there? He peaked, and now it's all downhill from there because he's not invested in the things that really matter. And I think it goes back to the question of why are we doing this? I believe that you can. I think you're right, that there are families that can do this, and they should do it. That they should be involved in, academics or in music or in drama because they see it as an opportunity to take the gift that God has given to them and to use it for His glory. I mean, we always talk about Tim Tebow. Here's a guy that God gifted in a certain area. Nobody knows Tim Tebow if he's not an athlete. I mean, he might be in the Philippines doing great work in missions, but nobody knows him. Millions of people don't look up John 3:16 when he puts it on his eye black because nobody knows who he is if he's not a great athlete. But he redeemed it. Don't you see that? This guy has redeemed his athletic ability. People with musical ability that redeem it for the glory of God. People with artistic ability that redeem it for the glory of God, rather than using it for their own means and their own ends. I don't care what it is. You know, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I listen to TED Talks, and I listen to guys that are incredibly gifted communicators who are doing it for what? Not the glory of God. And, you know, God made his tongue, and God gave him this personality, and he needs to know Jesus first. But to me, that's a wasted life.
Okay, so let's say somebody has the busy activities, the busy schedule, whether that comes from work or kids, or maybe you got a whole gaggle of kids and it's just keeping up with them is enough, you know? So this question comes in and says, how does one find life and rest in our demanding work and activity schedule? Is it possible?
I think they meant that for you, so go ahead and answer.
Well, Jesus didn't say, he did say in Matthew 11, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Psalm 23, that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. No, he will lead me, he will make me to lie down in green pastures, and he will lead me beside still quiet waters. And so it's available. It has to be available. He didn't say, well, unless you're too busy, or unless you have a lot of kids. It's available. So how is that possible? To me, it is a constant connecting with our Savior. That there is, Jesus himself had to do it. He had to spend that time away. And it doesn't have to be a whole day or a whole weekend, I don't think. I think if you can find opportunities practically throughout the day, first thing in the morning, when you're driving in the car, to not just use that time as dead space or mindless time, but actually to give that time. I like to listen to podcasts, I like to listen to sermons, I like to listen to teachings that remind me of what's true. Because when you're in the midst of all of that craziness, there's a fog that you come under, that you're just, I don't even know what's right, I don't know what's true, and that is the perfect opportunity for Satan to come in and to take us out. And I think that's what happened with Jesus. I mean, Jesus gets to the end of his time in the wilderness, and that's the time that Satan attacks. That's the time that he utilizes. And then at the end of that it says, and then Satan waited for another opportune time to go after him. So there are opportune times that Satan has. And I think for us, if we can, on a daily, regular basis, find opportunities to connect with Jesus, whatever that looks like for you, those need to be guarded. Those are times that need to be guarded. There are times with your family that need to be guarded. You know, if you have set aside Sunday evenings as your family time, then anything that says, well, we're going to have practice or we're going to do something on Sunday nights, you say no to, or you say, we'll be a part of this, but we can't make Sunday nights. And those are the times then when the no is, there are repercussions. Not only for you, but for your child as well. And I know that the difficulty is, well, my kid's not going to get playing time. That might be true.
It's a real pressure.
That,
you know.
I know.
You know.
I get it.
But you know what? And again, my perspective, your perspective. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Listen, I've got two sons who played sports in high school. Loved them. I played a lot of them. We're good in some of them. And and they went to college. You know, the big thing for high school athletes is Letterman's jackets, right? I want my Letterman's jacket so I can display all of my, manhood on that. Guess where their Letterman's jackets are? They're at home. They didn't take them to college. I said, I'm thinking practically, it's a good coat. It'll keep you warm. They're like, I'm not wearing that thing to college. Are you serious? What are people going to think of me? What do you mean? This mattered so much to you, until you crossed over to being a high school graduate. And now it doesn't matter. And somehow I think we have to say that and I don't know that you can, because the same thing, they come back and say, gosh, I wish I would have spent more time in the weight room, or more, I wish I would have done this. And you tell them as freshmen, you need to do that. And they don't do it, but they come back with regretting it. And so to me, it starts very early that, this is a good thing, but it can't be an idol to you. And let's enjoy it and let's redeem it. And in fact, for us, the best conversations I ever had with Cody, who is our oldest, were when we were playing catch together. And so I knew if he was down and I couldn't get him to talk to me, let's go play catch. And we would throw the ball, and pretty soon he would come out of his cocoon and we would converse. And so there were some good things in it. And I think they did learn a lot of valuable character lessons. But the problem is that those things can also lead them down a road that isn't good. Probably the regret that we have with Zach was he was a good baseball player. He got a lot of opportunities to go to other places to play on showcase teams and tournament teams, and played for the Falcons in Salina. And I didn't find this out until later, that he said those opportunities introduced me to tobacco and alcohol and other things. And we thought he was just, playing baseball. And he hit him well. He hit him really well, but they almost destroyed him. And so I don't really have an answer for that, except I think there are times we can redeem those things, but I don't think you can, as a dad, as a grandparent, as a friend, see those things as more valuable than they are. They're a tool that can turn into an idol.
There's a couple things that I have found that I really want Melissa and I have discussed a couple things we really want to teach our kids. We want them to love God more than they love us. We want them to know that they are loved irregardless of what they do. And we want them to know that they can trust us. Now, if sports and any other activity can help contribute to that, I'm game.
Amen.
I'm open to that. Mm-hmm. If it is going to pull away from that and tear that down and be a hindrance to that, I'm going to really question whether or not we will do that. I guess my hope is that as parents and families, we can really take inventory over what is the purpose? What's the goal for our marriage? What's the purpose? What's the goal for our parenting and our family? And that should help me to bring everything else underneath that and align it. So all of this, I think, is where our hope is in this conversation, is that it just gets some questions to be asked in dialogue with you all. And and that can be with sports, and it can be something completely different too.
We were talking this week, and I said to you, another regret that we have with our kids is we let them stop playing the piano.
Oh, yeah.
How many of you done that? We let them stop playing the piano. And, it's such a frustrating thing because, I look at athletics, and that's what we make it so it's so important, and yet they walk away from it. And for me, God is still using sports in my life by coaching. I was saved through FCA. I'm grateful for it, and I want to use it that way. But I know it's really, really limited for the most part. But you still play the guitar. You lead us in worship every Sunday because of that gift. Sandy Cole still plays the piano. She's probably not going to, run cross country anymore, but she can still use that gift so much further than any athletic skill. And what we tend to do is put that as a priority when it's so fleeting. And isn't that life anyway? We major on the minor things that aren't going to last forever. And I'm going to pick on Cord Hilbert a little bit. Not pick on him, but really, I just want to share something with you. And I asked his permission. So the Hilberts moved to Bennington from Solomon. And they moved into a little house. And it wasn't as big as the house they had lived in before. And so they were a little bit cramped. And Cord was in Solomon, going to high school in Solomon. And because of the distance, there are things that just stopped in their life. And if I get this right, if I get it wrong, Cord, correct me. But Tucker was telling me that, he was just bored. He was bored. And so somebody brought him a cheap guitar. And in his boredom, this great athlete who was really good at a lot of different sports starts playing the guitar. Now, Cord is at Fort Hays State University. He's not on a sports scholarship, but he's leading worship in a church plant because he was bored and he couldn't do what he wanted to do. I mean, that gives me chills to think that, first of all, he wasn't, running on red line. He probably wanted to be. He was probably complaining, I'm guessing. And yet, God used that and is still using that today. And he's redeemed something that is just a tool. He could be playing, Stairway to Heaven with that guitar if he wants. He could be playing Def Leppard or AC/DC or whatever, but he's using it to glorify God, and that is amazing to me. And so to me, I don't care what it is. There should be opportunities to redeem things, whatever that might be. Jesus, this great verse in John, which is Jesus, almost his final prayer for his disciples. Look what he says, and he's praying this for us too. He said, I don't pray this only for them, but those who will come along. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They're not of this world, just as I am not of this world. Sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so have I sent them into the world. We are citizens of heaven. Our home is in heaven. We have an opportunity there, but our goal ought to be to glorify God while we're here, use the gifts that we have while we're here. And if those gifts happen to be athletic ability, academic prowess, musical, or drama, those ought to be used for God's glory. And there are things, I think, that can be redeemed and maybe should be that aren't being redeemed. What if God does gift you as an athlete and really genuinely gifts you? Don't apologize for that. Use it for his glory. Know why your purpose. And I've said it before, that there ought to be some Sundays you're probably not here because you are at a tournament. Not every Sunday and not most Sundays, but a few. If you see it as, okay, where are the lost going to be on Sunday morning? Probably not here, but they'll be there. So why don't I use it for his glory? I was talking to Matt Pickrell, who is a roper. They have cowboy churches at cowboy places. Why don't they have basketball churches at basketball places and softball churches at softball places? I mean, why aren't we redeeming that? Why are we just letting the culture dictate who we are? Instead of saying, no, this is who I am. This is my bent. So how can I glorify you in this?
It reminds me of that quote that I sent you.
Yes, I know. I wanted you to bring it up
this week. So I was reading in this book, and Andy Crouch has this statement, and he says that Christians don't change culture by critiquing culture. They change culture by making culture. Now, we're critiquing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we are. Of course we are.
That's our job. To some extent.
Shame on all of you.
Yes.
That's our job.
But critiquing, if all we're going to do is look outside and say, well, they're doing wrong and shame on them, and that does nothing.
It doesn't.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't reach the lost.
No.
They hate us more.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, changing culture is something that we have an opportunity to do. It feels like, though, that is a huge upward hill battle. Like, how do we even begin?
What if we did? I think about our little footprint in Ottawa County. This may be unique somewhere else. We put all the people that play basketball, all the people that play volleyball, all the people that, whatever they do, we bring them all together and say, how are we going to redeem this? And there are times we say, you know what? We're not going to do this, and this. But we can leverage what we have to the glory of God. I think your wife said it in a meeting a few weeks ago, that she senses that there's pressure, but there's a little bit of being alone in this. If you're the only couple that really is doing this with your kids, then what that's doing is to a degree, it's ostracizing Owen. It's making it very difficult for him. People look sideways at you. And you've got Christians who are not following your lead in that could be. What if those 3 or 4 or 5 families said, you know what, that's good. Let's come together on that. Would that not make some sort of an impact?
Yeah. And,
I think it would.
And even if, honestly, to not feel like, yes, there is an isolation and ostracizing that happens in it. We've felt that a little bit. But even if the other families would simply not just say, well, come on, kind of that peer pressure thing, but to say, okay, I can respect that.
Yeah.
That would be great. Like, even that would be a fair statement and would, that's not why we're doing it,
right.
But there is kind of a statement being made in it, whether we want to or not. But it is something that we have just said, these are things that we're going to hold off on.
The other thing that you said this week, and I think it's maybe important to think about, is just sort of off the cuff, as we're talking about it, you said, maybe that's why I should coach.
Yep.
You can control some of that as a coach that you can't just as a dad.
It's true.
That was the fortunate thing for me is I controlled when we played, and it helped a lot. And maybe that's it too, is why don't we have Christian coaches that honestly, they see it as their mission, to do that. I have a friend, and I won't tell you his name, he goes to this church, but he's a great coach. And he is really working on something right now to redeem a certain sport that dominates the landscape, but he's saying, okay, we see it doing this, so I'm going to create some teams for the glory of God to go into those tournaments and to do those things. I'm like, bravo. If that's really what your purpose is, then I commend you for it. I think that's okay.
We probably need to land this.
Like, how are we going to...
Because Andy's going to have to talk here in about 10 minutes, so...
He doesn't care. No, we do. I don't really have a great way to land it, except, just like that verse. I think that verse ought to be really our calling card, that we're not of this world, but we're in it. We're in it. Now, we're going to go home someday, and it's going to be great, but while we're here, I think we ought to think about, what do we reject because it's sinful, and what do we redeem because it's neutral? I think every family should decide for themselves what that is.
I'll give just maybe a few questions to consider. And again, my hope is that this is not coming across in any sort of condemnation in any way. That could easily be taken. Please don't be offended. And I think, like Todd said, if it's something that's a conviction, please pay attention.
Yeah.
But here's a few questions to ask as you consider activities. Why am I doing this? Like, really? What's at the core of this? Not just surface level, but why am I doing this? Does this glorify God? Does this draw me away from important relationships? And is this going to contribute to training my child in the way that they should go? And so maybe just as a family, one of the things that we've talked about is encouraging families to have some devos throughout the week and talk about these things. So maybe asking those questions, just considering some of this. and seeing if it might be something that maybe you don't have any changes to make, and that's fine.
That'd be great.
But if nothing else, to think about them, pray about it as a family, and then see where God's leading.
Yeah, that's good. Why don't we pray? I hope this is okay or a little bit useful to you. Oh, Lord, thank you. Give us wisdom. We need it. We really do want to be a body of believers that understands its calling. And we don't want to just shake our fist at the darkness. We want to light a candle. And we pray that you'd help us to do that. So thank you for calling us out of darkness into your light. May we be a church that glorifies you. In Jesus' name, amen.